So good, so good, so good.
New spring arrivals are at Nordstrom Rack stores now. Get ready to save big with up to 60% off Rag & Bone, Marc Jacobs, Free People, and more.
How did I not know Rack has Adidas?
Because there's always something new.
Join the Nordy Club to unlock exclusive discounts, shop new arrivals first, and more. Plus, buy online and pick up at your favorite Rack store for free. Great brands, great prices. That's why you Rack.
For the News and Observer and the NC Insider, I'm Dawn Vaughn, your host for Under the Dome for the week of Monday, October 31st, 2022. I'm joined today by my colleagues Will Doran and Lars Dolder. Happy Halloween, everyone. It's spooky season, and we're 8 days out from Election Day. So on today's episode, we're going to focus on the North Carolina General Assembly races and the Supreme Court races. We're going to start with the lower profile but equally important North Carolina Supreme Court races.
Yes, low profile for sure. Surprise, we elect judges in North Carolina. I think that is something that is lost on a lot of people. But this year, actually, not only do we have some judicial elections, but the partisan balance of the Supreme Court could flip. I should note, too, there's also people have local judges for like their county trial courts. We have some Court of Appeals races as well, but the Supreme Court is the big ticket here. And it's currently a Democratic majority, 4-3, but there are two Democratic held seats that are on the ballot. So if Republicans win even just one of those, let alone both, they're going to take back the majority. And it'll be the first time since 2016, if that happens, that we have a Republican majority on the court. Obviously not all states elect their judges. We do, and we also have it in partisan races, so like it or not, the court does sometimes get political. It takes, kind of what you might normally think of a Supreme Court doing, business cases, criminal law matters. You can think, death penalty, racial bias in juries, Fourth Amendment cases, things like that. But it does really have a huge political role. And that's really even amplified in the last few years because we have divided government. We've got a Democratic governor and a Republican legislature. And they, surprise, don't always get along. So whenever they've got a power struggle, it's really the Supreme Court that kind of has to step in and act as the referee. So we've seen, plenty of rulings in some of those cases. We've seen recent rulings on issues like gerrymandering, voter ID. And really what we've seen lately is the Democratic majority on the court almost always has been ruling that the Republican-led legislature has acted unconstitutionally, and the Republicans on the court have almost always dissented against that. So, you can probably kind of tell with the elections, if Democrats keep control of the court, that trend is probably going to continue. And if Republicans win back control of the court, they're probably going to be a lot more hands-off with the legislature.
So, Will, you're our Supreme Court expert. So you, of course, know all of that. But do average voters know that? Do they even pay attention to the opinions in the cases? Like, do they know we elect judges in North Carolina?
No, people are not paying attention to the rulings. And you know what? Good for them, for the average person not spending their time paging through these 200-page.
That's what we have you for.
That's my job. I was at a debate last week and some of the candidates were saying, I've been out on the campaign trail meeting voters. They're like super energized and excited to vote for me. And then they'll tell me like, good luck up in DC. Or they'll ask me, am I in your district? And they have to be like, no, like the Supreme Court, it's a statewide election and it's in Raleigh. I'm not running for U.S. Supreme Court. I'm not running for Congress. I don't know. So people just don't really know what the Supreme Court even is, what it even does. And that's something that is tough for the candidates. They want to sit there and, talk about their judicial philosophy, things that they think the court has gotten right or wrong. But you really, for like when you're out talking to voters, you really have to just talk about like the very basics of like how civics works. And so, that can be tough. For that reason, there is millions of dollars of ads pouring into the races to help voters make up their minds.
And are all those ads incredibly factually accurate?
I'll hold my tongue on that.
Well, maybe if a newspaper did a voter guide that explained a lot of things. Oh, wait, that's us. So be sure to look at newsobserver.com for our massively comprehensive voter guide. We've got how's North Carolina different with its election process than other states. We've got I want to early vote. How do I do that? We have an early voting turnout numbers story already. We have candidate questionnaires for hundreds and hundreds of races. So if you have any questions about candidates, about your candidate, if you're a candidate listening to this, your opponent, you can read what they say about everything in our voter guide. So the other thing that people may not realize too, the average voter, about how, in addition to how the court and the legislature works, is that a lot of things that people see as national issues are also state issues. So with the U.S. Supreme Court throwing abortion law back to the states, that's on the General Assembly here in North Carolina. And the current law stands at a general ban after 20 weeks pregnancy. But depending on how the election turns out, it's usually Democratic voters that have been more motivated. Maybe Republicans also, if they aren't happy with the current law, want that to change, or North Carolina do something. Obviously, the federal government has a say too, but the way things stand right now, the state does. So, Lars, we've got like certain races that, again, it's all 170 seats are up, but a lot of those are unopposed. The leadership isn't changing. Speaker Moore is going to be Speaker Moore, assuming that Republicans don't lose a majority or supermajority, which is unlikely. Senate Leader Berger, a lot of the Republican leadership on the big committees are running completely unopposed. So that brings us to swing districts. What are our swing districts?
Yeah, and let me just preface that briefly. You talked about some of what's of consequence that maybe average voters don't always think about. We hear supermajority thrown around a lot at the federal level. That's critical at the state level as well. And sure, there are 170 seats up for grabs, but only 5 really need to change for there to be a dramatic shift in the way the legislature actually operates. A supermajority means simply that one party reaches a point at which they can overturn a governor's veto. And so you can imagine, with what has already been a Republican majority, not supermajority, with a Democratic governor, there's been conflict sometimes in the legislature that makes it to the governor's desk. And he's had the authority to turn those over with his veto. And there haven't been the votes in the legislature to defy him. That could change if a supermajority takes power. So, like I said, there are only 5 seats that would make the difference between Republicans holding a supermajority versus a current majority. 3 of those would have to come from the House and 2 in the Senate. And it's interesting. I've talked with legislators and other politicos, staff members and such at the legislative building on background, but just to kind of feel out where they think this is going. Because we've heard since the short session from leaders like Tim Moore, they've talked big that they're going to win the supermajority. But we have to wonder, is that just part of the political game?
Well, they have to. They're not going to say we're going to lose.
Exactly.
When I talked to Senate Democratic leader Blue, he's like, yeah, this, I'm hopeful, because if they're not, get a new job and you're going into it thinking you're going to lose. Right?
And what would that say to constituents?
Right,
So exactly. So
yeah.
I've wondered to myself, is there really confidence in the Republican Party that they're going to say that they're going to win this, or are they just talking what they need to talk? Mm-hmm. And the feeling I'm getting from these kind of behind the scenes conversations is that they genuinely and sincerely think that there's a strong chance they're going to win the supermajority. And a few races always come up in these conversations. One is NC House 63, which is kind of the northeastern expanse of Alamance County. It includes Graham and some parts of Burlington. And Ricky Hurtado is the incumbent there. He's a Democrat. He won against Stephen Ross, who'd represented that area in different iterations of the district lines, of course. But since 2013, he'd been there. And so it was sort of a big upset when he lost to Ricky Hurtado. But Alamance is historically red. They voted for Trump. He won comfortably in the federal elections. And so it was a bit of an outlier when this Democrat won. And Republicans are pretty confident they can swing that back. It's Stephen Ross again, who's running against Hurtado again. So we see the same characters involved. And they think that they'll take it back for Republicans. Another in the Senate is District 17. That covers sort of the reddest parts of White County, Holly Springs, and Fuquay-Varina. By no means, but looking at the voter dispersion, would one say that it's absolutely a red district or absolutely blue. But Sidney Batch, who's a Democrat, is the incumbent, and she was appointed in 2021. And so that's just not great, really, for one's political acumen to have been an appointee.
Well, she did serve in the House, right? But then she lost her House race, and then in the Senate, Sam Searcy, maybe almost the day after Election Day, I think, said to come out, and then Batch was appointed.
Right. So exactly. So that sort of those stepping through those those ins and outs with the House. It's not the strongest appearance for an incumbent compared to some others who've been there for many years, maybe terms, and in a swing district. And so the opposition, Mark Cavaliero, Republicans think has a really strong chance. So we'll see what happens, but it will be interesting. You know, we're not on this podcast making predictions, of course, but the consequences of things shifting is an interesting discussion.
I think, and it's interesting about the appointed factor. There are a lot of people in the legislature that were appointed and then had these full careers, and that's a story to do at some point. But a lot of the appointments aren't just that they're not in swing districts, right, like that, but they also had their PAC support within their community, and they were appointed because they had that ground support from their district, which is all blue or all red or whatever. And once you get in there and you are the incumbent, and you have the name recognition, and if you make people happy enough, then they get to keep you around. So we've got a lot more to talk about with the legislative races. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with that and Headliner of the Week.
Score more with the college-branded Venmo debit card and earn up to 5% cash back with Venmo Stash. Got paid back? With the Venmo debit card, you can instantly access your balance and spend on what you want, like game day snacks, gear, tickets, and more. The more you do, the more cash back you can earn. Plus, there's no monthly fee or minimum balance. Sign up now at Venmo.com/collegecard. The Venmo MasterCard is issued by the Bancorp Bank N.A. Select schools available. Venmo stash terms and exclusions apply at venmo.me/stash terms. Max $100 cash back per month.
You're listening to Under the Dome. I'm News and Observer Politics reporter Dawn Vaughn, here with my colleagues Will Doran and Lars Dolder. So before the break, we talked about the legislative races in swing districts. Two of these swing districts have had residency challenges. One I wrote about, one you wrote about, Will. I wrote about Valerie Jordan, the Democrat running in the Senate district that's 10 counties from Warren County all the way to Currituck, which is where Senator Bobby Hanig is the incumbent. Speaking of appointments, Hanig, however, was in the House and then had planned on running for Senate, ended up fulfilling the rest of the term, was appointed. I don't know if he's even voted on anything yet. He was sworn in locally, when I talked to him last, which I believe was about this residency challenge. So Republicans had found that Valerie Jordan, the Democrat running, spent a lot of time at her house in Raleigh, where she lived for work, and not really a lot of time in her house in Warren County. But it ended up getting kicked up from the local board of elections to the state. And the state board of elections said, yeah, she's fine. So she's on the ballot. That's the standing of that. But since then, we've had another one with the challenge of a Republican, Will, and you wrote about that with E.C. Sykes.
Yes. This is a kind of a North Raleigh Senate district. There's no incumbent running. And it's pretty much a toss-up district. And it's one of those ones that, Lars was talking about could be just one of the small handful that Republicans need to flip. It's currently a Democratic-held seat, currently represented by Sarah Crawford, who's going to run for the House instead. And you have E.C. Sykes on the Republican side, Mary Wills Bodie on the Democratic side. The Democrats just very recently filed a petition that says Sykes doesn't actually live in the district, which is not allowed for the state legislature. If you're running for Congress, you don't have to live in the district. You can live wherever in the state you want. But for the legislature, you do actually have to live in the district you want to represent. And they say that Sykes does not. They say the address that he claims to live at and be a registered voter at is actually just a completely empty lot where there is a trailer. They had some private investigators follow him for close to a month daily and then talk to all the neighbors out there. The neighbors said that they've hardly ever seen him. Sykes says that he's there 5 days a week, 5 nights a week, sleeping there. Their investigators saw him sleeping at his other house outside the district most nights. So it's just kind of this, he said, she said, Democrats say his camper doesn't even have electricity. Sykes says, no, it's got plenty of utilities and it's great, and that he's been living there. So, this is the Democrats were too late in filing this to do anything. Like Don, you said with the Valerie Jordan complaint, the Republicans filed that early enough that the state board could actually look at it, make a decision whether or not she would be allowed to remain on the ballot. Democrats took too long on the Sykes one to do that. So we're going to just have the election. And then if he wins, then there will be an investigation to figure out, okay, does he actually live in this district? Obviously it's a tough bar to pass. The complaint against Valerie Jordan went nowhere. There's actually a very similar complaint to the Sykes one against Columbus County Sheriff Jody Green, who we've been writing about recently, who recently resigned from office for other unrelated reasons due to a criminal investigation against him. But when he first won in 2018, his house was actually in South Carolina. And he said that he was living in an RV in Columbus County, which had South Carolina plates. So a lot of people said, this guy doesn't really live here. But even that was good enough for the State Board of Elections. They certified him as the winner. So
apparently there's a good market for selling RVs to lawmakers.
Yeah. If you can identify a potential politician who wants to run somewhere that is not where they own a house or are renting a house, and you have an RV to sell,
there you go. Hot tip for our entrepreneurial readers, our listeners out there.
Before we get to headliner, since we were talking about EC Sykes and the Mary Wills Bodie race, I want to share something from them. So like I mentioned in the beginning of the show, we did candidate questionnaires for all the legislative races, and this is a really important race. One of the questions we asked, which was my idea, since, longtime listeners or readers know that I really love covering the budget. Yes, for real. Anyway, the question was, at a time when costs are rising, state government has a surplus, how should it be used? And we talked about abortion being a motivator for Democratic voters, and inflation, of course, is a motivator for Republican voters, aside from it just, of course, being the midterms in general. And anybody has noticed that everything costs a lot now. So we asked both Sykes and Bodie what they would do with the surplus, because coming up, whoever wins is going to be a vote on the budget next year. So Bodie said, I support a healthy rainy day fund. This is what she would want to do with the surplus. I support a healthy rainy day fund, which the legislature does. However, in order to build a stronger North Carolina, the excess surplus consisting of our citizens' hard-earned money paid in taxes should not be hoarded, but rather wisely invested in job creation initiatives, grow our economy, infrastructure, et cetera, education system, and of course, education and fully funding the Leandro decision is a Democratic talking point and something that's really important to them. Sykes, on the other hand, said increase investments in NC infrastructure. I guess that's not on the other hand, because both of them like saying infrastructure. He said, in continuing our economic growth. And then again, this is a Republican issue. He talked about the implementation of a reduced tax structure and cost controls. Speaker Moore, I had asked him what they would do if they get the supermajority. And he said that the tax cuts will continue kind of on what they're doing. Like they don't necessarily plan to speed it up, but that's where we are. So now we're at headliner. I'm going to go first. This is a longtime soapbox issue I have. And my headliner is traditional trick-or-treating, where you actually go door to door in neighborhoods. It can be your neighborhood or not your neighborhood. It doesn't matter. We're all neighbors. You can go to a neighborhood that maybe is more pedestrian friendly, or that people, will give out more candy, have their porch lights on, decorating, whatever. But there are trunk-or-treat things you can do if you want to do that on the weekend before, but nothing beats the actual Halloween night of trick-or-treating. And just it's a real community thing that I always enjoyed as a kid. And my son's aged out of it, but we will be giving out candy, dressed up, and last year decided to become the full-size candy bar house. So that's my legacy to trick-or-treaters everywhere.
Lest anyone doubt Dawn's sincerity and enthusiasm, she is saying this with a pumpkin sweater on right now.
Sure. And candy corn earrings.
I didn't even notice.
All right. Will, what's your headliner, or who is your headliner?
Well, I live in the same neighborhood as a candidate for office, so I will go over on Halloween and report back if he's been handing out yard signs and mailers or if he's just handing out candy. But my headliner, this will be a little risky, but Elon Musk, who just bought Twitter. We recorded this a few days ago, so Twitter may or may not still exist by the time that people are listening to this. Big changes on some of our favorite platforms. And if it is still around and you want to follow the News and Observer for our politics coverage there, our page is at Under the Dome. And also if you click on the little dots on that page and say where it says view lists, you can also find all of us individually. So if it's still around under the new ownership in a few days, find us there and check out our tweets with all of our good stories.
You can still listen to our podcast and read our stories and all our other things, our insider events that we have that you run, Lars. So, all right, Lars, I say this with a tone of voice just to preface. Well, I'm not going to preface it. Go ahead, Lars, and then commence the trash talking.
I'm more excited for this headliner than ever before. Brace yourself. Last week's football game between NC State Wolfpack and Virginia Tech. I am a state grad, if anyone doesn't know.
I am a Hokie.
And Dawn is a Hokie. And I wish you could see the disgust on her face right now. In case you missed it, Thursday night's game last week, in the third quarter, was it? They were down. That is, State was down 21-3 and rallied to win 22-21.
I mean, did they rally, or is it just a rebuilding year for Virginia?
Whatever. You can't take away my joy. The State, oh man, I was about to turn the game off. I mean, who would have ever thought? 21-3. Tom Brady couldn't have done better himself. I'm also a Tom Brady fan, so now everyone hates me even more. Grew up in New England, so 21-3 comebacks are my team's specialties.
Well, I mean, you only won by 1 point, so we did have a bad quarter. But it was 0-0 at halftime, and I will give State credit for having a good atmosphere there with the lights and the variety of dogs and.
Wait. So and Dawn was actually at the game. You have to share with us a brief version of the highlight of the night as Hokie fans started to. Actually, it was State fans who got. Just tell the beer story. I'm doing it injustice.
So I was in the visitor section which was mostly Hokies, but some Wolfpack, and everyone was very cool. Wolfpack fans are nice, except for that one guy that nobody liked. But anyway, and Hokie fans, of course, were the best most of the time. So
that one guy, by the way.
So he was the fansplainer to the people he was with, so they didn't want to listen to him either. But there was a guy that was excited and cheering. And was so excited that he let go of his beer, which I think was even in a koozie. And so we just see this can like sailing across rows of people. It didn't hit anybody like on the head, but kind of sprayed everybody. So you see the collective group of people that turn around and give that face when a beer came flying through the stands at you. So I think you can know what that looks like. And the guy's face was just shock. And it was an accident. He dropped it in his excitement. And he said, "I'm so sorry." And he climbed down to everybody, apologized profusely. We didn't get splashed, so I'm like, whatever. And, shook hands and apologized to each and every person that got splashed by it. And then the one fan, these are Hokie fans, because like I said, we're great. He picks up the can and he said, "Do you want the rest of it?" And the guy's like, "Yeah, thanks." So anyway, the fan experience was fun, but wow, that was a tough loss.
Maybe that's a good political metaphor, even when we're cheering for different teams and, we can still be cordial and nice to one another.
And if you accidentally spill your drink on somebody, say you're sorry and mean it. So.
And to that effect, we should have talked about, we don't have time, but maybe another headline for another day would be Cal Cunningham and Tom Tillis. But we'll just leave that hanging there.
Yeah,
you have to come back for another podcast to hear more.
All right. For the News and Observer, I'm Dawn Vaughn here with Lars Dolder and Will Doran. We'll talk to you next time.